Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with episode 3 of World War II every single week. This is Poland on her own, September 15th, 1939. Now, before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I'd love to join the Discord. Follow me over at Twitch, and please do go check out the two gaming channels here on YouTube. One is for the stream VODs, and then the other is edited content. The edited content I am pretty proud of for my skill level. So please do go check those out. Now, I am going to be honest, I was surprised at how well episode 1 did. I was not expecting that sort of reception to this series. And I guess, you know what? It kind of makes sense. I probably, over the 2 years of watching the Great War series, probably did build up a chunk of you who may have honestly only watched me for that. I don't know. That was 2 years of stuff, and those videos were pretty consistent in viewership. They never really went to the top of what I do, but the World War II one did really well. World War II one was like, not too far behind. I believe see, when that uploaded, I would have had the Gods and Generals reaction, I think, uploaded as well. Or did that come after? I can't remember. One of the Atten Shea videos. The Atten Shea videos, typically when I react to those are like first or second place in my YouTube analytics ranking of my last 10 uploads. World War II, episode 1, because I am recording this before I upload week 2. Episode 1 ranked was like second or third out of my last 10 uploads. So that's pretty fucking good. Will that continue? I do not expect that to be the norm for this series. If it is the norm for this series, that would be amazing, but that is not my expectation. If we can average a little better than what I would average for the World War I series within a 24-hour period, I'll be content with that. So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for that, because one of the reasons why I didn't want to start the series was like, do I really want to start a series I know is going to average views that may not be the best? But hopefully, with the way episode 1 performed, those fears can be put aside. I've yapped enough here at the beginning. Let's dive into some more tragedy.
September 15th, 1939. If you're a nation living next door to a mighty war machine, you might have allies who've promised to back you up in a crisis. But sometimes, when that crisis comes, those promises turn out to have been empty.
Yeah, you know, I think the moral story of history is do not trust the Western powers to support you. At least the history of the 20th century tells me do not trust the Western powers to support you if they say they will support you. 21st century is a bit of a back and forth so far. We did, let Russia take Crimea in 2014 and do some pretty fucked up stuff to Ukraine then. And then we changed our mind in when did that started in that invasion started in 2020, didn't it? Did it? Was it 2020 or was it 21? Has it been? There's no way it's been 4 years. Has it been? No, because did it start under Biden? Or was Trump still on? Guys, I'm forgetting stuff. Oh no.
I'm Indy Nidell. This is World War II. Last week, the German Blitzkrieg, Lightning War, swarmed across Poland, penetrating to the east of Łódź and even taking Krakow. In the conquered territory, the SS began its police and security campaign against civilians, which is a nice way of saying terror and murder. Britain, France, New Zealand,
Ooh, I like this map.
Australia, and South Africa declare war on Germany, and the war at sea begins as the SS Athena is torpedoed and sank by a U-boat. Here's what follows. In Poland, the Germans think that by now, most Polish forces have retired east of the Vistula River, but actually a lot of them have regrouped around Kutno. 10 Polish divisions under General Tadeusz Kostrzyba are there with more arriving. They attack across the Bzura River against Kluge's 8th Army. These are seriously heavy battles, and the Poles have success for the next few days, although the tide eventually turns against them. The Germans assemble...
I'm curious what the Polish generals' thoughts are here as their line completely fractures. What is their goal now in this war? Because the way that they are fighting it currently, and there's no way, there's no salvaging now what has happened. Poland, by this point, is going to fall. And so, in my mind, the best, of course, solution would be turn to guerrilla fighting, turn to go underground, dissolve the official army in a way, I guess, and serve more as guerrilla forces, resistance fighters at this point. But the generals aren't doing at least that general there. When we look at this kind of what's happening here, seems more like the general is going to continue to work his army like it's a traditional fighting force, and attack the Germans. I don't want to say traditionally, but I don't know a better word to use in this context here. What is his goal? He's not going to break out. And if he is trying to break out, why is he trying to break out for the south and not the north, where there's perhaps possible ships to get a way out? Or at very least cross into Sweden, or get up to, Lithuania is... you don't want to go northeast, because that's Soviet Union now. You kind of... I don't know. But anyways, what I'm trying to say, it kind of just seems like just throwing the men at the Germans to kill as many of them as he can before his own soldiers die. Which, fair enough, but also, I don't know, maybe the better idea would be to go underground with your pretty sizable fighting force. I don't know, and try and set up No. It's I want to know his goal here. What is he trying to accomplish? 'Cause I don't see a visible, reasonable thing that he could accomplish operating his army the way he's operating his army right now. Is there any point to discussing this? No. It's just something I'm curious about.
His 8th Army. These are seriously heavy battles, and the Poles have success for the next few days, although the tide eventually turns against them. The Germans assemble reinforcements from Army Group South and will win the fighting by the end of the week. Far to the west on the 10th, the first large units of the British Expeditionary Force land in France, though small groups have been arriving since the 4th. Field Marshal Lord Gort is in command.
Gort?
This
That's a stupid name.
month, we'll see 160,000 men come to France, right? That's pretty much the same number of men who are taken prisoner by the Germans just this week at the Bzura River.
Oh, Indy, how I missed how you bring up comparisons like that. The British just sent 160,000 men. That sounds like a lot, right? It is. The Germans also captured that out east. Goddamn.
By this time, the main focus of the invasion is on Warsaw, the capital. On the 9th, the 4th Panzer Division attacked the southeast Warsaw suburbs, but is beaten back. The German bombers, though, are ruthless in pounding the city. Hitler's generals proposed that Warsaw be starved into surrender, but Hitler doesn't like the idea of a siege of any kind, and wants it bombed into submission. On the 14th, the bombing is even heavier than usual, and it is also Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year.
No.
The 3rd, of the city's population of 1.2 million are Jews, and the Jewish quarter is attacked by air as the synagogues fill. On the 11th, the Germans cross the river San. On the 13th, a small German force crosses the Vistula south of Warsaw. The following day, the Germans enter Gdynia, and the Panzer Corps reaches Brest-Litovsk. That day, the 14th, they also enter Przemysl, the great fortress town that saw so much action in World War I.
Ah, the memories.
A third of its population are also Jews. 43 of the leading Jewish citizens are arrested, beaten, and then shot. Poland had pinned its hopes for surviving a German attack on Britain and France. Back in March, those two had given guarantees, eventually formalized, that if Germany attacked Poland, they would fight.
Polish independence? Why then, that would inevitably start a general conflict in which this country was involved.
France, for example, had promised Warsaw
All the homies hate Neville Chamberlain. Remember that?
that they would attack Germany's Siegfried defense line within 13 days of mobilizing. This isn't going to happen. The British had promised that they would immediately begin a bombing campaign of Germany. This hasn't happened.
Oh my
As Max
God.
Hastings writes, both powers' assurances reflected cynicism, for neither had the smallest intention of fulfilling them. The guarantees were designed to deter Hitler rather than provide credible military assistance to Poland. Of course, the Poles believed
And of course, never make those kind of deals. Don't try and deter if you're not going to follow through on it. Like, how many times have we tried to deter people with threats only for them to then call you out on the bluff? I feel like it happens almost every goddamn time. Right? Like, if you're gonna say something, promise something, back it the fuck up. Like, come on.
them. The Polish army was the fourth largest in Europe, so they thought that an invasion would last months at least, but they hadn't fully mobilized this year because the British and French wanted to avoid provoking Hitler. And though Poland has a lot of men in its army, the Germans are way, way better armed and armored. Poland was fairly poor. Its national budget was smaller than that of the city of Berlin. And something else I mentioned a couple weeks ago is coming back to haunt them. Even though the French had told them,
Yeah, being a nation that is occupied by three separate powers over the last like 100+ years or so, and then having a lot of intense fighting happen in it during World War I, only to then be forged out of the fires of World War I, only to then have to fight the Soviets in the 20s to maintain your independence, and then a little over a decade later, Germany comes in. I don't think that amount of time is enough to build up an economy strong enough to also build up a military formidable enough for one of the strongest nations in the world. Just, like, I don't know. Especially a nation with very militaristic roots, very prideful in their military roots, with likely generals that had fought in World War One. Whereas the Poles don't have that. You know, I'm just saying.
to concentrate their defenses behind the three big rivers at the center of the country. The Poles had chosen instead to defend the entire 1,500-kilometer border with Germany. Part of that had been to defend Polish industry, a lot of which was in the west. But by now, that choice is revealed as unwise as the power of the Blitzkrieg descends upon them. As for relying on more powerful allies, Antony Beevor writes in the Second World War, the fact remains that neither the British nor the French people were psychologically prepared for war, mainly because they had been misinformed by politicians, diplomats, and the press. Anyone who had tried to warn of Hitler's plans, such as Winston Churchill, was simply regarded as a warmonger. And those leaders, like British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain,
It's them playing politics because they don't want to be right. You have so many people. Like, here's the thing: their logic in getting to the conclusions that they got to, like Neville Chamberlain, valid to an extent, right? Obviously, we have the power of hindsight to understand how stupid the decision, Neville Chamberlain's conclusion was. But for the time period, we do have to acknowledge the conclusion that he reached. And also when we even look to politicians of the modern day and how war is typically seen and how they also typically kind of want to avoid it, because especially leaders of nations typically do not want to be the ones that get be the one in charge when their nation is brought into war. Right. Unless absolute, like America, World War One. Y'all know how much I fucking hate Woodrow Wilson. But he held off on joining World War One for probably for a ridiculous amount of time. Especially like by American standards, I feel like he held off for a ridiculous amount of time in avoiding and staying out of war. But he held off for a super long time because it is very bad PR to be the president, to be the leader of the nation that brings you into war. War is not popular until it's something that is pretty much forced upon the people by the outside force. You don't want to be the president of the aggressor, right? Right. Like, I understand it, Neville Chamberlain. Still fucking wrong though.
Chamberlain had, during the whole of the late 30s, done nothing but appease Hitler to the point that he had even complained that he had been thwarted of having a war in 1938 because the British and French kept accepting all of his increasing demands. But Chamberlain and company were okay with a rearmed Germany, partly assuming that other statesmen and politicians shared their values, so they did not understand Hitler's ruthlessness, partly because it would be a bulwark against Bolshevik expansion, partly because there were those who felt Germany had been treated poorly by the Treaty of Versailles, but mainly because they were horrified by the idea of another European war. When Hitler kept saying he just wanted to bring Germans in places like Austria and the Sudetenland back into the Reich, they didn't really see any reason to object. It was not until Hitler annexed the rest of Czechoslovakia back in March that they finally saw that Hitler's claim of uniting Germans was just a pretext to grabbing more territory.
Yep.
That's what finally forced Chamberlain to offer Poland guarantees in the first place. You know, back at home within Germany, there were plenty of people who had denounced the Nazis pre-war, and some did so about the Polish invasion as well. But there was a real deterrent to that by now. I mean, thousands of people have fled the tyranny of Germany over the past few years, but that's no longer possible. The borders were closed, and new restrictions were placed on movement. Over 1939, the whole Gestapo system had been spread to the recently annexed Czech lands, and Vienna and Prague were both under hard Nazi domination. Even now on the 9th, 630 Czech political prisoners are taken to Camp Dachau, north of Munich, and the atrocities in the conquered territory continue. I read in Martin Gilbert that on the 8th at Bedzin, 200 Jews die when they're forced into a synagogue, which is then set on fire. But this comes with a twist. The next day, the Germans accuse the Poles of this action and execute 30 of them in a town square. German Quartermaster General Eduard Wagner writes in his diary the 11th, "We are now issuing fierce orders, which I have drafted today myself. Nothing like the death sentence. There's no other way in the occupied territories." There are, of course, many German officers who do not share this view. But what can they do? Even Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, chief of the Abwehr, the German military intelligence. This week, he comes to Poland to see the army in action, right? Well, His officers tell him of massacres, of things like Poles forced to dig mass graves, then being lined up and machine gunned into them.
Oh, yeah.
So he goes to Hitler's headquarters train to protest. He sees Wilhelm Keitel, chief of the Armed Forces High Command, and tells him about this. Keitel tells Canaris to take the matter no further because this has been decided on by Hitler himself. Here's the thing. Keitel also tells Canaris that from now on, in just the second week of the war, every German army command in Poland will have to have a civilian chief in addition to the military one. The civilian one will be in charge of the racial extermination program. Keitel's words, not mine. Well, Canaris says nothing when he meets Hitler, but according to Karl Gödler, former mayor of Leipzig, Canaris returns from Poland broken by his country's conduct of the war. What Keitel calls racial extermination is given another name on the 13th as units of the Death's Head SS begin cleansing and security measures. These included, according to
It has escalated to specifically ethnic cleansing now.
its own report, the arrest and shooting of large numbers of suspicious elements, plunderers, Jews, and Poles, many of whom are killed trying to escape. And the week comes to an end, with the Germans advancing ever further into Poland and taking prisoners in the hundreds of thousands. The Poles now felt that they were on their own, though this week Canada did declare war on Germany. The French
Let's go, Canada.
formed a war cabinet, and the Allied Supreme War Council had its first meeting. I mentioned Wagner's diary. Well, on September 9th, Hitler's chief of staff, General Franz Halder, was talking with Wagner about the future of Poland. Wagner would write in his diary, "It is the Führer's and Goering's intention to destroy and exterminate the Polish nation. More than that cannot even be hinted at in writing." There were many German officers who despised Hitler. German officers had prided themselves on being apolitical, but in the 1930s they had been seduced by the idea of an increased military and massive rearmament. And now, well, Anthony Beevor puts it like this: opportunism went hand in hand with cowardice in the face of authority.
Yep.
19th century
Perfect quote.
German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck once said that moral courage was rare in Germany, and it deserted a German completely the moment he put on a uniform. Well, the Nazis had by now managed to get everyone into uniform, even the children. If you like this content,
Going from that creepy ass shit to you like this content. Indeed, don't change.
and wish for us to continue, please support us
Well, that was week 3 of World War II. Poland on her own, September 15th, 1939. I'm not going to ask if you enjoyed this, but please do hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I'll see you at week 4, or my next video, whichever one you are here for. Peace.